Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries RPG podcast with John and Hannah.
Hi.
We're back once again with another bonus voicemail episode, cracking open our bulging postbag and looking at all the lovely messages that you send us. And first of all, we have a message from Joe Richter of the Hindsightless podcast.
Hey there, you two. Great episode on why not to make a ginormous character background. Lots of really good points in there. I was wondering if either one of you two have ever actually had that happen. John, during the episode, John was talking about something being an apocryphal story, and that got me thinking. In the 10 years I've been back in the hobby, no player has ever brought me more than, I'd say, like a paragraph, maybe two, of a character background. And when I was playing as a kid, nobody ever did that. And so I was just wondering, was that really popular from like the mid 90s to 2010 or so during that time period? Because I didn't play at all during then, so I think I missed some of these tropes. I've just heard people talking about players doing this for years now, and I've just never seen it myself. So anyway, have you? Peace out.
Hi Joe, thanks for the message. Now that you mention it, it was the late 90s. Early 2000s when I encountered a few of these.
Them World of Darkness days.
And I must admit I was guilty of more than one or two of them myself. I know the GM that we played Vampire live action with thoroughly approved of the lengthy character backgrounds, but rarely got a chance to use them for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that left quite a few players frustrated.
I think as well there was a certain feeling, certainly amongst the players that I gamed with when it came to like, the World of Darkness and the storyteller game systems, was that you had quite a lot of like what are called backgrounds in those games, like your level of resources, your haven, stuff like that. And it almost felt like the done thing at the time that you had to have like a really detailed background to justify why you had more money than God, or you had servants or a mansion or whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose to some degree when you're supposed to be playing a 200-year-old vampire, it is useful for the GM to have a vague idea what you were up to for those 200 years. But again, 5 bullet points are a lot more useful than 5 pages of writing.
Yeah, and I think as Hannah was saying, certainly when we played like Mind's Eye Theatre, which is the live action version, that's like a parlour RPG. You know, you actually role play out like the meetings in Elysiums and stuff like that. A lot of the actual action of the game takes place in downtime. So because you're writing lots of downtimes and stuff like that, because this was before emails and whatever, you had to like write on a piece of paper and hand it over to the GM. So since you're already doing that writing, having a background sort of made a bit more sense in that specific type of game. And then I think probably we just carried it forward to other games, really.
The other thing to consider that is that over the last 15 years there has been a big rise in places to put fan fiction.
Yeah.
And people talk about that sort of stuff a bit more with each other and pass those places on to each other if they like that kind of fiction. So there's like a suitable place to put it so it doesn't end up getting put into your roleplay game unnecessarily.
And I think you're absolutely right, Sweetie. There's more different outlets for that creative energy. Whereas I certainly know that sort of like early to mid 90s when I was sort of doing like live action Vampire, I didn't have a blog, I didn't have a podcast, I didn't have anything like that. So a lot of my creativity all got funneled into like my character, and I was like, I want to make this the best character in the world, and he's going to have a 200-year background and justify all the things on the sheet and the flaws and the merits and stuff like that. And yeah, I think part of that as well was also sort of getting carried away with like the idea of like, oh, it's this new type of system, it's different, it's all more in depth and more involved, which now when I look back at it seems a little bit silly. But obviously when I was in my teenage years I really got swept up in all that. So I think it definitely has happened, but I think you are one of the lucky people to have missed that period of role playing. So let's see what else Joe's got to say.
Hey Hannah and John, loving the monster episodes. I think they're really, really cool. If you're looking around and stuck for a monster, maybe you could do red caps. They're one of my favorite monsters, but I don't know much about them outside of the gaming world. So, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway, you two, keep up the great work, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.
Hey there, Joe. Thank you very much for your suggestion. Both myself and Hannah are big fans of red caps, actually. We've role-played a number of them at various LARPs that we've been to, and we've certainly used them in tabletop games as well. we should be doing an episode on Red Caps for the Friday Friend or Foe, and in fact that'll probably come out before this episode is broadcast, so please feel free to call in and tell us what you think about it.
Cheers.
Okay, so thank you very much for those calls, Joe. And now we've got a couple of calls from my old mucker, Colin Green, fellow co-host of Purple Worm, and also, of course, of the legendary Spike Pit podcast. So let's see what Colin's got to say for himself.
Oh man, bang on guys with the taverns. There's so much you can do there. Recently I'm running in Port Nyanzaru route, and there's a place called the Thundering Lizard. It was just a name on a page in a book. I'd failed to prepare properly, and I totally had to improvise this crazy, colourful place known for its reputation of liveliness. I took inspiration from things like the Notting Hill Street Carnival. To some extent, I think I had the Club Tropicana video playing in my mind and various 80s music videos. So it was party central. The bar owner was like a kind of vaguely Rastafarian guy with dreads, and he was a frustrated singer, so he keeps bursting into bits of song, or he's kind of like calling out tune as the band is playing in the background. It's been such a great location, really different. We're really enjoying it. Keep up the good work. I've also been super enjoying the Friend or Foe Friday. I was quite surprised with the unicorn episode. I don't know what I was thinking really on unicorns, but you brought some insight to me. The comparison that you do with 2nd edition Monster Manual and 5th edition, I really like that idea, and the two of you kind of bouncing ideas backwards and forwards is always going to be a winner. I think getting back to the 2nd edition 5th edition thing, I think some of the deity and sort of like gods type celestial stuff was dialed back purposefully in 2nd edition because of the sort of backlash from satanic panic, but I could be wrong on that one. Take care. I'll catch you later.
Hi Colin, thanks ever so much for the messages. I'm really glad you're enjoying the podcasts. I hadn't at all considered the idea that the 2nd ed Monster Manual would have been affected by the satanic panic, but you're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we tend not to think about it because we didn't really have it to the same extent.
No, Spirit Games got picketed a couple of times. People pointed and laughed, and then they didn't come back. That was it as far as we heard about it. You know, there'd still be kids in school going, "Oh, D&D, that's devil worshipping," but they weren't at the D&D club, so who cares? Whereas I think over on the other side of the pond, it got to be a massive thing, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, over here, if you like Hannah said, you had a couple of people sneering us again about devil worship, but over here you could tell them to fuck off, whereas you couldn't really do that in America, so because it was so prevalent. So I don't think we felt the pressure of that to the same extent. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Colin. I genuinely, like Hannah, had not considered that at all, but it's definitely something to bear in mind in the future. And I think there are probably a number of different factors contributing to the increased sort of prevalence of deities and demigods and stuff like that in 5th edition. Obviously, they're going for a more mythic, sort of high fantasy vibe in 5th edition, whereas your OSR stuff tends to be a bit more sort of down and dirty and a bit more sort of grubby. I don't want to say low fantasy because there's magic and stuff in it still, but it certainly has a different feel to 5th edition. Not to say that either of them are bad, just that they are sort of approaching it very differently. But as you say, there are certainly other considerations to take under advisement. And finally, to round things off for this episode, we received an email from my old friend Rob Davis in Canada, and he says, "I just wanted to drop you a line saying I listened to and enjoyed this episode. I sympathise with your frustration at players who don't show up for games." So he's obviously referring to the players sort your stuff out episode. "I think you have more patience than most in this regard. When a GM espouses the qualities of a good player versus a poor one, they often omit reliability." And Rob says, "I'll take a player who is only mediocre at playing but reliable over one who is a good role player but unavailable half the time." And he rounds off by saying, "Anyway, I enjoyed the podcast podcast and look forward to the next one. So thank you very much, Rob. Really glad you're enjoying the episode and you're listening along to them. And yeah, I agree, it can be very frustrating. And I think part of it comes from that whole sort of nonsense idea that players just turn up and play and the GM does everything else. Whereas I've always approached it with the idea that everyone getting involved in a role-playing game is responsible for the enjoyment.
No game.
Well, exactly, yeah. And everyone should be pulling together to make a game that's enjoyable for everyone, rather than everything getting lumped onto the GM. So thank you very much for that email, Rob. That's it for this voicemail episode. Thank you to everyone who has got in touch with us and left us messages. If you want to get in touch with us and feature in a future show, you can leave us a message on the SpeakPipe website, link in the description, or you can send us an email to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see you next time, take care, stay safe, and keep gaming.
Bye.